All right. Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to another Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. We are so excited to be here today. Today we have Mr. Robert Jones back on with us. Hey, Robert.
How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you so much for coming back. We can't wait to dive into this conversation. So before we get started, if you are here, go ahead and tag a friend into the group that needs to be listening in. We're going to continue the conversation on Nonprofit 101, which is our part of our theme this month, along with leadership and board development. So definitely tag your friends into the group so that they can tune into this. If you're catching us on replay, as usual, go ahead and give us a hashtag replay so that we know that you caught this video. So we'll love to see you there. We'll give it a few more minutes before we get started, and then we're going to jump right into the conversation. I'm so excited. Can't wait. Be ready to ask any questions that you might have, and we'll continue to monitor the chat throughout. So once again, if you are here, go ahead and tag your friends into the group, into this chat. Remember, you have to invite them to the group first, then go ahead and tag them into the chat so they can tune in with you. And if you're catching us on replay, give us a hashtag replay in the chat box. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in, Robert. So first and foremost, I know you've been on with us before, but if you can just tell us about yourself and how you entered into serving nonprofit organizations in your in the accounting realm. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so I am from Chicago, born and raised. When I graduated from college, I started at a Big Four accounting firm in Chicago, Ernst & Young. And after being there, I was accepted, hired into the role of being a tax preparer for charitable entities. So most of my clients were hospitals, private foundations, supporting organizations. Left there. After about 8 years, left there and went to a private family office, a large family here in Chicago, and helped them with their private foundations and operations. And then after leaving there, I went to a bank where I focused on charitable entities as well. And then decided about 3 years ago, three and a half years ago, that I wanted to start my own firm. And so we're doing well. We're growing. I love it. So things are going pretty smooth in that arena.
Awesome. And I love the fact that you shared, through your journey, you've been working in the charitable realm along the way, because I know that not a lot of accountants have specialty in working in the charity realm. And I know that there's a difference between working the for-profit, as an accountant versus serving nonprofit organizations. Yeah. I don't know if you want to touch on a little bit of what that looks like.
Awesome. I'm glad you brought that up because, a lot of times when I consult with people, they'll say, I had an accountant, but they didn't work out. And I go, was he or she a nonprofit accountant? And they'll say, no, I don't think so. So with for-profit, I'm not going to say it's easier because that's not true. But with for-profit, it's more of an income in and out situation. But with nonprofit, it's more tracking the income that's going in and out to grants. We know about that, of course, and how reimbursable grants, with for-profits, you don't really have that type of a situation. So the specialty we have, not only is it a specialty, but of course, being in this role, it's a lot more hands-on with the client than it is on a for-profit side of things.
Yes. So you all hear that. So when you're looking for an accountant, call Robert. But if you don't call Robert, make sure you find someone that has that specialty in the nonprofit arena, because there are different, different laws even associated with a nonprofit organization. So make sure you definitely do that. Hey, Dolly, thank you for tuning in. Yeah, if you're here, go ahead and give us a hey in the chat box so we know you're here. Go ahead and ask your questions. It's not often that we have Robert on, so you better get your questions ready and drop them in the chat box so that, and I'll read them out throughout. All right, Robert. So this month's theme is Nonprofit 101. We're just going back to basics, just reminding organizations of some of the things they should have in place. along with for newer organizations, get them thinking about what that looks like. So in the accounting realm, what would you say, or just in general for nonprofits, what would you say are some basics that nonprofit organizations should be looking into?
Some of the basics, of course, really, has to do with just going back to the accounting, right? We'll talk about governance and things of that maybe today on the call, but when it comes to the basics, having a proper board, not just randomly picking people, but why are you choosing those individuals, right? What skill set do they have? Do they have the same drive and passion that you have as a founder, right? So that you will not, you're basically going into business together with these people. So you have to really look at it from that perspective. But when it comes to the basics of nonprofit 101 from an accounting perspective, having an accounting system such as QuickBooks, hiring an accountant who specializes in nonprofits, that person could actually help you to grow. So I don't necessarily look at my clients and just think, okay, let me just categorize their items, but I try really, really hard to be a resource for them when we have conversations monthly. Have you tried this? Have you thought about this? My goal is for you to make money. It's not part of it, yes, so I can make money, but the big part of it is because you really are serving a community of people who possibly are depending on you. And so your accountant or your finance team really should be, from a one-on-one perspective, really should be someone who is trying to drive growth from a revenue perspective. So that's some of the just basics when it comes to that. Once you get into a groove of having proper financial statements, some of the other basics is, how do I attract funders? And one of the reasons I'm attracting funders is not just having income statements, balance sheets, and things of that nature that we provide, but one of the things we talk about in the basics is attracting them through your impact. So keep track of that as well. How many people do you serve? What are the demographics? What's the real impact you're having on these people's lives? And that doesn't take necessarily a rocket science to track data in that way, but it really does help when it comes to looking for funding too.
Love it. Okay, so you talked about the basics of starting a nonprofit some of the basic accounting pieces, and I too can attest. And just so you all know, so you call nonprofit enthusiasts, you're working with us, and then it comes to a point where you need an accountant. This is the person right here that we're calling. So Robert is that person. And then also I can also attest in our nonprofit organization, Robert is our accountant as well. And I know the when we brought Robert on, I felt a sense of relief because I was doing the books before. I was the one trying to do everything. I felt a relief that I, as the executive director, can go out and just fundraise and focusing on bringing the funding. And I had the ease of knowing Robert got everything else taken care of. And then also there's that reassurance that you have that when a donor wants something from you, like they say, hey, I want to see how you spent, the money that we gave you, I could just call Robert, hey, he runs that report, and then we're good, so that's a sense of relief that it has given our organization, and something that you should consider as an organization if you are, or like me, where I was in the sense of trying to manage the books, fundraise, go out, build relationships, all those roles of an executive director. This is one role that I would really encourage you to speak with your board about and see how you can alleviate this off of your plate. So thank you for that, Robert.
Oh, yeah.
So let me go over into the chat really quick. I seen some movement happening. Hey, Brenda, thank you for tuning in. And then we have Vanessa asks, is this available after you had an issue come up? Not a problem. Just come back into the group and you will see this in the group. Also, we'll be putting it in the guide section as well. So it'll be here, and just give us a hashtag replay when you watch it. Yep, we're holding you accountable. All right, and Dolly says serve. Yes, Dolly, that is right. How many are you serving in the impact? Love it. So let's talk a little bit about, and I kind of took, so there's that famous conversation. So I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization. And of course, a lot of times the goal that's not the primary goal, but founders would like to exit their job and focus on, working their nonprofit organization. So they're sometimes in the position as the board chair, because they're that founder, they serve as that leader. And then at some point, sometimes they're also the executive director. Can you talk to us about what should that structure truly look like? Is it okay for someone to wear all three hats like that, being a paid member on the board and a on the board and also the executive director? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I run into this actually often. So you do not usually see board members being paid. Mm-hmm. That does not mean they cannot be paid. There's a difference. The IRS states that if a board member is paid, they're not an employee, but they would receive a 1099 if they received compensation from the organization. Now, again, do not see that often, but I have seen it at very large organizations, believe it or not. Okay, so that's the first thing to keep in mind. The second thing is, let's talk about titles for a minute.
Okay.
The founder.
Can I ask you a question really before you go into that? Okay, so that the board member must have a 1099, regardless of, I know there's a threshold that typically for 1099s, that's regardless of the threshold. That's like is it the $600 or whichever?
Yeah, so if they receive more than $600, the organization would issue them a 1099.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But the board member, what you're saying is board members need to have a 1099 regardless of meeting that threshold. Or is that the same? That still sticks as well?
That still sticks. As long as it's over $600, they receive it. If it's under $600, they would not receive it.
Okay, got it. All right. Got it. Okay.
So that's the catch, the little caveat to that. And keep in mind, when we're speaking about this, we're going off of the IRS instructions, not necessarily what Robert thinks or anyone else. So keep that in mind, because you always want a point of reference. I believe in that. So the second thing to keep in mind is the actual titles. Some people will say, I'm the founder and executive director. That tells me that you are not a board member, but that you are an officer, meaning you're the executive director. That means you do not have legal obligation anymore or legal responsibility of that organization.
Got it.
So sometimes people they'll say all three, and I'm like, that's not technically possible. From a legal perspective, that's not possible. So you can be the founder and executive director. That means you're being paid. So be careful using that title, especially when you're talking to funders. Right. Be careful using that title. The title that if you're not being paid, that would mean you're the founder and the president, or the founder and vice president, or treasurer, or whatever other title. Some people want to keep the title founder. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do that. But once you veer off into saying I'm the executive director, that's when it's like, oh, you're being paid now. And they're like, no. I'm like, you're not the executive director. You're the president of the board. So all of that really matters. If you change board positions, you should be changing with the state that you're located in as well, not just on a whim. So all of that really matters.
So, okay, so if you're the founder and executive director, you can be, but that means you're not the president of the board. Someone else would be in that place, and you no longer have that voting right for the organization. And then there's the founder and president. But what happens if you're in the position with oftentimes newer nonprofits, you are in the position in the sense of that you are the president, but you're also operating as an unpaid staff. So it sounds like you're saying, no, your role is a president. You're just doing those duties.
You're just volunteering like I do with the organization that I'm president on.
Got it.
We have an executive director. We got 45 employees. I'm the president of the org. And when I go to board meetings or I visit the site or different things of that nature, I'm just a glorified volunteer. I don't get paid for it at all. So that's something to keep in mind. Yep.
Got it. Love it.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Any other like tips that you might have for when it comes to leadership and board development? And really quick, before we go into that, I saw Brenda popped a question. She said, what about the title of founder and CEO, which also falls in the executive director realm? So that would mean that you're not the president of the board.
That's correct.
Yep. So I hope that answers your
question. Exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, awesome. I hope that answers your question, Brenda. Yeah. So what are some areas in leadership, other areas you feel that when it comes to leadership and board development for nonprofit organizations that they should also look into?
You know what, I strongly suggest, and I even do this for myself, you know, even though I've been doing this for a while, I strongly suggest taking board leadership courses. And, you know, whether you pay for them or, you know, go to YouTube University, I call it. You know, I strongly suggest taking those, but be careful listening to information without a reference. So the IRS 990 tax return instructions, even though it's 108 pages long, you know, it's my little Bible I keep next to me.
Yes.
Even though it's very long, it's very, very informative when it comes to having a reference point. So board governance also means having a reference point to understand the legalities of the organization too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
love it.
My tip on that.
No, I love that tip. And so going back to let me see, Danita says, if president doing the role as executive director, should I fall in a 1099 state? So if I'm the president and doing the role as an ED, should I fall in the 1099 state? And I'm going to see, based off of your reference, that I'm going to see if I can answer this. And then if you want to, so pretty much it sounds like you cannot be the president and executive director of the organization. You would need to either be one. And if you are am I going the right direction on Robert based off of the reference? And if you are a paid director, then you should not be the president of your organization. Someone else should be holding that governance structure.
That's correct. So the catch is here's the catch. Board meetings, right? That is that's real. Whether you have them 4 times a year, once a month, that is actually extremely important. So when you're having those meetings, naturally, when you start off, you're the board president. If you started the organization, right? You're the board president, you're the founder. If the board decide, hey, you know, we raised enough money, we want to transition you to the executive director role now. That means in that board meeting, the board has voted to hire you as the executive director. And then you would start receiving like real compensation. So when you first start an organization, unless somebody just give you a bunch of money up front, but when you first start an organization, you're really putting in the blood, sweat, and tears the first couple of years until you start generating income. So you're in a role, you're still not the executive director legally and technically. You're just the board president who's volunteering to raise funds.
So let me ask you this. So earlier you talked about, so like in this situation that Danita gave as an example, so you talked about earlier, if you're on the board, you can potentially get paid, even though I know generally it's not like, you know, the preferred, I guess the best practice, you should say. Yeah. So in this instance, let's say, and I'm just going to throw a scenario out here. So the same scenario, president and executive director right now. That's what you are right now. I heard Robert and he's quoting the IRS and I realized, oops, this isn't, you know, like, what am I going to do? So let's say it, so there's that debate of, okay, I don't have enough, my organization is not bringing in enough to pay me as a executive director based off of compensation of what executive director should get. But if I was the president, they could 1099 me to do some of those actions. What does that look like? Meaning which role would that be most appropriate is for that individual to remain in that president role, get 1099? What's that threshold where it's like, oh no, at this point you need to hop off that board?
Okay. Oh, that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind the tax return is a public document.
Mm-hmm.
So funders do not necessarily like to see paid board members.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Correct.
So just keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're going after large funding and they see that every board member is getting like $300 a month or something like that, imagine what a funder is thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So just ask yourself the question, do I want to present myself that way? Now, you have a board member, she's an attorney, right? The board that I sit on. She did a significant amount of work. She saved the organization from hiring an attorney that would have cost us like $20,000. So we made an arrangement with her because she did a lot of work. We made an arrangement with her as a board member. Hey, instead of giving them 20, you're going to do the same work. We'll give you 10. Now, she agreed. And on the tax return, it just shows that you received a 1099 for $10,000. But she saved the organization.
Right. 20. Yeah.
So that's
right.
something else to keep in mind. So even though a funder may see it, but they'll also see in the Schedule O of the 990, oh, that's why they paid her. And oh, they saved a lot of money. And
right.
You got to realize, like, when you're presenting yourself, especially from a tax return perspective, you got to kind of explain that. Like, why did you pay this board member? Well, this person provided a real service. They didn't just get paid just to show up to a meeting. So that's really important.
I love that. So like in the role I used to play overseeing funding, that was one of our things. If the board member is paid, they could not be paid. It wasn't like maybe, or it's like they couldn't be paid. If you're going to get this funding, they could not be paid. And then that led organizations to make that tough decision. If they felt that this money was going to be used to pay whoever those board members are, they will have to come off the board or decide not to and work as staff, or decide not to receive compensation. So you might hit those hurdles where funders are going to tell you no, and it might be something that you might want to kind of plan for ahead of time, because it is going to happen where a funder is going to tell you no. If your board members are paid, we're not giving you this funding, or they can't be paid through this funding is probably what they'll say. You can't use this funding to pay them. They can't control all your funds, but this funds, you can't use that to pay them. And then you have to kind of make that decision as to what does that look like. And because of that, you definitely want to look ahead. Like, what does that succession plan kind of look like? What is the next steps? So even if your organization is not there right now, kind of looking ahead, okay, when that $200,000 grant from the government comes in, what's going to happen? I'm going to step off as, thinking ahead. I'm going to step off as a president. I want my vice president to become president. Your board should start having some of this conversation. What do you all want that to look like? And make sure that you all are on the same accord, because a lot of times, when that funding comes, it comes quick. So you got to be able to activate at that point. So just be proactive and start looking at that now. What would that look like when we get to the point where all those funds are coming in? Where would that put us as a board, based off the roles that we're playing right now in our board membership?
Yeah, excellent point. Point.
Love it. And then I love that you talked about taking courses, be careful and listening without for reference points, right? And I love that, because the one thing I will say, and I definitely agree, we are in the Google.com era, the YouTube era, the social media era, where information is hitting us like from all different directions. And you do need to look for a reference point, just like how Robert said, the IRS, so everything he said on here, go look at the IRS. And now confirm the things that was shared. You definitely want to have a reference point, because I've heard false information. It makes me cringe when I hear it. And it's true. They don't have a reference point as to where they're getting this information. It's just something they may have seen and thought this is the way it is, but not being able to say, no, the IRS says this, or, if you go here, this, this is why that's the governance over that section. So definitely looking into that, not just for our topic today on leadership and board development and those courses, but just overall with all the information that you all are receiving. So love it. Any other things before we close out today on the basics that with this month's theme, Nonprofit 101, leadership and board development, that you'd like to share?
One of the things is just keep learning. Mm-hmm. Keep learning, keep educating yourself. I love podcasts. I recommend those. We recommend, if you hear something that you may not necessarily understand, always go to the IRS website and the instructions. Yes. I'm a reference person, but that's my answer for everything. So keep that in mind.
And they're long. Yes. And those instructions are long, so make sure you read them and become familiar. And another instructions that's also good is your the Secretary of State also releases has their own, like, the laws, the chapters within your own state for nonprofits. Knowing that is also helpful. If you wanted to go straight to the sources, those are really good sources. They're long, be ready, but reading through them, is really good for you to know.
One small thing is making sure the organization is registered to solicit funds in the state. Now, every state does not require that. In Illinois, where I'm at, you have to, sign up to solicit money from people. Mm-hmm. I know every state does not require it, so make sure your state requires that, because you can get fined if they, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that you said that. And actually, Chanel dropped that question too, right? Like, it's like you both were on the same. Yeah, she said, does a nonprofit have to register in order to solicit? And you said with their Secretary of State to solicit. And I'm going to tell you this. So yes, you talked about Illinois, and here in Florida, interestingly, it's not with the Secretary of State. No, it's with the Department of Agriculture.
Illinois is the Attorney General's office.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. You definitely want to look into
that. Yep. So definitely that you do not want to get fined. I heard of an organization I was actually talking to this week, interestingly, when they found out that they had to do it, they actually reported, when they found out that this even existed, I need to complete this to solicit, they called them and let them know, hey, how do I do this? And they went ahead and fined them and they pretty much said, I've been soliciting it. And anyways, they fined them for it and they got it in place now. But yes, make sure that you check in with your state when it comes to soliciting before you start fundraising in that state. And if you're a nonprofit right now, you're listening and you're like, I don't know anything about that, you need to look into that for your state, just to make sure it does not have it. And if it does, follow during that process.
Yeah.
Love it. Awesome. I think this was a really good conversation. Very, very helpful information that questions that come up often. And I know you talked about doing your podcast. Here's another place. This is my shameless plug. You could come to Nonprofit Enthusiast Live every Thursday, drop your questions in the chat box, or catch the replays for some information as well. So definitely, continue to learn, like Robert mentioned. Anything else, Robert, before we close? I know we covered a lot today, which is really good.
Yeah, I don't have anything else. If you would like to, we do free consultations. Mm-hmm. It's no pressure, of course. Our goal, number one, our goal is to point you in the right direction to hire the right person. It doesn't mean that's going to be me for you. So we do offer that where we chat for 30 minutes and we point, give you suggestions with references. Course.
Love it.
And so we definitely provide that, and we love doing that. So if you would like to reach out to me, please do so.
Awesome. Yeah. Love it. And I don't know if you want to drop your link or whichever, or if you drop it in Zoom, I can drop it over.
Okay.
And as far as the filings, if you need help with the solicitation, feel free to reach out to us as well. We're here to help you. If you're a nonprofit organization listening in and you're like, hey, I'm ready to get started, feel free to reach out to us as well over at Nonprofit Enthusiasts. We are here to help you go and grow. Awesome. All right. everyone. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Robert, for being on. We definitely gonna have to book you to come back on later this year. Well, if you can hang on, so then we can get you booked once we're done with this live. So we'll go ahead and do that now. All right, everyone. So thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.